Thank you for joining us on this episode of First Alarm Family First. I'm Jen Herrera alongside Carolyn Acosta. And while this started as a passion project for firefighters in South Florida, the reach of these conversations extends well past that. That includes with our guest today, right, Carolyn?
Yes, today's guest is Fire Chief Steve Serbic from Vancouver Island, a respected leader in the fire service, a passionate mental health advocate. He's the author of two books, The Unbroken and The Extinguished, two powerful books sharing his personal journey and his travels, and his traveled across North America. He's also done a TED Talk, which is very fascinating, and I heard it the other day and loved it. Steve, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hey, Caroline. Hey, Jen. Thanks for having me on. No, I don't. I'm joking.
We're done.
Yeah, you know what? This isn't a journey I thought I'd be on. 10 years into my career at a very busy fire department, I looked at people who were struggling or, having troubles with depression or anxiety as weak. That was me. That's the guy I was. And then one day, I had my own challenges and I didn't know what was happening. And it's been a long journey. I'm still on it. People ask me all the time, like, how did you put your depression in a box? And I'm like, I didn't. I just, I have a relationship with depression and anxiety, and I I work with it. It's something that I have, and you know what? I speak openly to people that are struggling or having dark thoughts. I worked on a mental health task force for 4 years, and there was three of us. I've been on helicopters. I've got several firefighters and police officers to emerge. Visited them in a psychiatric unit. I have done hundreds of hikes with people that have never been to clinical counseling or don't know what struggling really looks like. And for men, and I speak about men, I've never done an intervention with a female first responder, but it's scary for men when they don't know what's happening. And there's in the stoic, culture that we work in, putting up your hand is really, really hard.
I love that you said the stoic culture that you work in because that's such an appropriate word and we haven't heard anybody use it, but it's true. It's just like this demeanor, right? This wall that you guys put up in this profession. What was that point, Steve? When did you realize, okay, I'm going to bring these walls down. I'm not going to put that stoic front up any longer.
Mhm. Well, it's interesting because I've had so many moments in my career. I mean, I got hired in 1990. I've held every position in the fire department, including fire chief. I am currently an deputy of operations in a 170-year-old fire department in Victoria. But before that, I was the fire chief of a neighboring fire department. I've held the battalion chief rank, captain rank, lieutenant rank. Um, I never wanted to admit to it ever. Even in 2018, Caroline, if you watch that TED Talk, I kind of dedicated to a gentleman that was in my department that I brought in as a peer support, a man of strong faith. And I don't subscribe to a religion, but I learned so much through his chaplaincy in the fire department, how to manage and speak to firefighters. Is a beautiful thing. And so I had him doing our SISMs and our peer support. And, he came in, and the last day I saw him he was checking on me. And I wasn't doing well, actually. I was an operations chief, and he's like, "Are you okay?" And I lied to him. I said I was. And he walked out the door, and that was the last day I saw him before he took his life. And, you don't get those answers. And both of us were out there talking about our depression and our anxiety and our mental health. And so when he took his life, I immediately felt vulnerable and weak. And, I have studied shame, and I've taken neuroscience courses, and I have done clinical counseling courses. And Brene Brown said it best. Brene Brown's on a stage, and a guy walks up to her and asks her a question about men. And she said, "I don't study men." And he said, "Those books you just signed for my wife and my two daughters, those women would rather see me die on my white horse than fall off." And that's how men feel. Brene Brown, honestly, she has cracked the egg for me on how to be vulnerable and how to face my shame. Like when I hear her talk, and if there's a lot of firefighters or first responders listening to this podcast, I mean, I empower you to, just watch some Brene Brown if you don't read books, but read some of her books. She's a beautiful human being and a leader for first responders when it comes to looking inward. And that's what we need to do. And it's really hard for a human. But even when Ken Ken Gill was his name. When he took his life, I had written my first book about my childhood and all the issues that I had, and kind of actually built the foundation of shame in my life that I had every day, but I wouldn't acknowledge it. He said to me, I want you to finish that book, Steve, and just give it to your kids. And I'm like, okay, Ken. But he also wanted me to talk about mental health and really get out there. And it wasn't until he took his life that I actually had the courage, Jen, to do it. And I did it to honor him. And the second book came from the part, chapter 11 is the smallest chapter of any book ever written, but it's the darkest moment of my life. I still struggle talking about that moment, but he wanted me to do it. So when I wrote the first book, it went across 60 newspapers in my country, and I was on all the major television news networks. And I was an operations chief in my old department, which was one of the busiest fire departments in the country. I was terrified of what people are going to think of me still. Even though I'm out there, I'm still worried. My own stigma is as great as the people I drive to emergency. You know what I mean? So I did it to honor him, and it's gotten easier. Being on this show is way easier than it was 4 years ago.
Mhm.
Right. So, and it'll be easier in 3 years from now, So, and I meet such incredible people. I was just on one in Berkeley probably 6 months ago, and she goes, I got this badass fire chief with this cute Canadian accent. I'm like, I got a Canadian accent? What are you talking about?
You have a Canadian accent, Steve.
Okay.
So, your TED Talk resonated to me, and I feel like to so many. What was that moment like for you, being on that stage, sharing, with your story with the public?
Oh, Carolyn, I love that question because, to be honest, I have battled anxiety my entire life, like since I was a small little kid. And I tell people, I help firefighters who are applying, and I talk about anxiety and like, hey, Olympic athletes never say they're nervous. They always say they're excited. You just tell yourself you're excited. So I wasn't on until 1 o'clock. I bet you I told myself I was excited 100 times, but I was so nervous when I walked on there. And I really was worried about blowing it up for my friend Ken. And so it was hard for me. Like, I got a speaking coach. I did all the right things. But when I got in front of that stage and I knew it was going to be global, I didn't do my best work. Like, my wife will tell you I can talk like crazy. But when I was on that stage, I just really wanted to honor my friends. So it got into my head.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So when I normally get on a stage, like I was in West Palm Beach, Florida. I spoke to about 1,100 people at a pro board conference, and I've never been more comfortable than, it just came out. And so it's interesting. Super nervous, Caroline, doing that TED Talk.
I didn't notice. I loved it. I thought, like I said, it resonated, and I really felt like your story.
Well, it's funny because I'll give you a firefighter joke that you can both relate to. So when I was on there, like, I got a text as soon as it aired, and it said, hey, I heard a camera puts on 10 pounds. How many cameras did they have on you? 5? And I was like, yeah, there was actually 4, but yeah, I get it. So there's your firefighter jab.
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
Of course, not surprising, right? And that's what they led with. Steve, you mentioned this chapter 11, the shortest chapter ever, part of your, or not part of your darkest moment. What's in chapter 11?
Chapter 11 is, I'm trying to figure out my life. I'm full of shame, and I'm driving across the iconic Lionsgate Bridge, which is a mini Golden Gate Bridge. And I've done a lot of work with Kevin Briggs, the guardian of the Golden Gate Bridge. I was driving across, and the thoughts of suicide had entered my head. I'm going to say hundreds, but maybe thousands of times. I visualized my wife with another man. I visualized my kids being happy. I visualized every issue I created for my family being fixed if I took my own life. And so when I meet, I do have significant intervention training. When I meet with the first responder, if I ask them if they're thinking of harming themselves, and if they attach a positive to it, I immediately know I'm going to emerge. And if they don't, but I think they're going to take their lives, I ask them, so why do you want to live? So I make them put words to why they want to be there. And if they can't do that, and I think they're about to harm themselves, I drive them to emerge. Because driving them to emerge doesn't mean they're going to stay. But my kind of jam is that trip to emerge, and I try and wait with them and be there for them. But the majority, 95% of those first responders, I do not know. I do not have a relationship. Somebody has called me for help, and so I used that moment on that bridge and that weakness that I had. And here's the cool part of that story. There's a yellow box on that bridge that if you're struggling, call for help. Where I stopped my car was exactly where that box was. When I stepped onto the bridge deck, was the first thing I saw was that, which was like a bucket of cold water for me. I drove to my doctor's office at 4:30 in the morning. I cried, and she held my hand and she said, "What do you want?" And I said, "I just want to be unbroken." And she said, "You're not broken, you are wounded." And that change of narrative for myself, the first book is called The Unbroken. That is why it's called it, for that moment. I managed to find I started to YouTube and research the unbroken, the word. And I found this YouTube clip called The Unbroken. I've sent it to every first responder that's struggling to listen to. And some have told me I listened to that thing 1,000 times, even when I can't get out of bed. So my journey has taken me into very interesting places, but I've met so many very beautiful people that were struggling just like me in their darkest moments. And I get to play a small part on their journey out of that shame hole. Because when you're at the bottom, there's only one way to look. It's up. But you still have to look up to get out of it.
You're their yellow box. That's how you put that.
Yeah.
You're
There
their
you go.
box on the bridge.
And I love what you said. I mean, you're not broken, you're just wounded. I mean, that's just those words alone just change your whole narrative, Do you think that the departments are doing enough in terms of peer support and like proactive training?
I don't know what the department down there does, or I don't know what Florida does, but I know up in Canada we're moving away from the Mitchell-Sism model, because we used to sit I do SISM sometimes. We used to work a 4-day shift up here. Now we work a 24, but in 4 days I could do a SISM 3 times for a nasty call. And we would talk about the events and so when I was an operations chief in that department, we were still supposed to do a SISM, but if the third alarm assignment showed up where there was like a double fatal or a murder, I would hold that third alarm assignment outside at just outside of the area. And I wouldn't do a SISM for them because SISMs are proving to be harmful. Departments are still doing SISM. I'm a big fan of peer support where we talk about our emotions. And so now we do a one-on-one peer support with, Jen or Caroline. If you were on my peer support list, you guys would check in on me and I'd feel comfortable talking to you. And I'm like, I'm okay, but you guys could read the room and Steve's not okay. And you do a check-in 2 days later, Steve, what's going on? And I start crying for no reason. Like, it's just such a better model. Caroline, we're just starting to understand how detrimental SISM is to the whole process, especially that diffuser. And the IFF has done a lot of great work and they're out there promoting we shouldn't be doing SISMs anymore. So the answer is no. We are still allowing bullying and harassment, especially for female firefighters. People of diversity is still being tucked away. We had a female suicide in one of our big departments out here, and it was directly from bullying and harassing. No, we're not. I'm an advocate for the fire service. Greatest thing that ever happened to me. With all the shit, Jen, you can cut that out.
No,
But
shit, you're fine.
there you go. That is still going on. But there are so many beautiful people trying to make a difference. But the culture's tough. It's hard. It's really hard. And apparently I've been quoted as being a badass and intimidating. I'm not. When you go for a drive or a hike with me, I'll cry right alongside you. Right? I believe in human emotions, but hold on. I had to learn that as well. Right? I was kind of thinking I was all that in a bucket of chicken. You know what I mean? Like I had the sexy job with the uniform. And when I had to cry for no reason, I didn't want anybody to see that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. It's a double-edged sword, isn't it? Because our firefighters are these hardcore individuals, a little rough around the edges. There's a lot of like old school mentality that makes it such a cool profession. But with that, there's some of those negatives associated with it as well. So it's trying to find that balance. We talk often, Steve, about past traumas. I know that you did not have the easiest childhood. It wasn't until your teens, if I remember correctly from what I read, later on in your teens when things started to shift a little bit. How much of your trauma do you think is a result of how you grew up and what you dealt with as a young person versus in the field as a firefighter?
Yeah. So here's the deal. If you asked any first responder, 95% of them got into this profession to be helpers because something that had happened in their past life. And most of them have not dealt with that. It might be dark. It might be a mistake they made. So to be honest, Jen, you carry that throughout your career, whether you deal with it or not, it's always there. The subconscious is super powerful. And for me, I just spoke at a recovery center, and the reason I did this recovery center, because we have homeless police officers and firefighters in North America. And there was one who had been homeless for 15 years and he's doing meth, and he had been a 7-year career firefighter. And I went there to speak to him specifically, but I didn't want to single him out because I know he would be full of shame. So I went to speak to the whole group. And in that group, I got asked, if you could go back in your life and change anything, would you? And I'm like, no, because it would change of all the beautiful people that I've met on this journey. But I would like to go back and have one moment back. And, these homeless people in recovery asked me, what was that moment? I said, well, when my mom came out of recovery when I was 11 years old, I wish I could go back there and just give her a hug and say, you know what, Mom, I understand. And I looked at all these people in recovery and I said, because we don't need people to always fix our problems. We just need them to understand. And I think that's the missing piece for people that are struggling. You don't have to talk or you don't have to go and do a TEDx, Caroline, and talk about your dark early days. You just have to know they're there and they affect you, and it's hard. And so, Jen, I think they've always affected you. They still affect me. Sitting right here talking to you folks, they're affecting me.
Yeah. So if you've spoken across North America, is there any departments that stood out that you're like, man, they're really doing an amazing job with their mental health, advocacy? Like, have you noticed any departments that have that?
Yeah, I think Colorado State is probably, well, they were the leaders. Like when you go down to, if you've been to the Fallen Firefighters, Caroline, you'll see a department that leads in mental health in every single way. I mean, they probably have done a better job of reducing the stigma and making it okay for firefighters to put up their hand. And, when you put up your hand, you don't know what's going to happen. And it's terrifying. It is terrifying because of what are people going to think. But, I quietly wanted to publish that first book to honor Ken. I didn't really want anything to happen with it. I didn't write it to publish. I wrote it in therapy, to be honest. It sat on my shelf for, over a decade. I had nothing but compliments from across the country. I had so many first responders reach out to me and say, thank you for normalizing how I'm feeling with the courage to doing this. I'll tell you, I had a beautiful story for a very high level member in the police force in another province. And she just said, can you sign a book for me and mail it to me? Absolutely. And she told me, I always say this, are you okay at the end? Take care. Are you okay? That's what I always say. And she responded back in an email that said, I think about taking my life every day. And I responded back with, that's terrifying. Where do you live? She told me. And I said, where's your family? She goes, I'm single. I said, why don't you move closer to your family? She said, I'm being demoted. I responded back with, you're thinking of killing yourself? 3 question marks. And so it must have been after midnight in her province where I was. There was 3-hour time change. And in the morning, she sent me an email. I'm so embarrassed. I told you some very personal, I don't need the book. I said, look, I'm sorry. I've already written the book I'm sending, which wasn't true. I wrote it after I spoke to her. She goes, please delete my information. And I do that every time someone reaches out to me. I delete their information. 4 months later on my LinkedIn account, so I could see who she was, she sent me a message and what police department she was with. And she said, Steve, living with my family in this province, 4 hearts. Thank you. So when you are courageous enough to tell your story, you don't know how many people you're going to affect positively or quietly, right? So what you 2 folks are doing here is you're never going to know the people that you're affecting. And I'm going to tell you right now, you are positively affecting thousands of people. So thank you.
No, thank you for that. And thank you for recognizing that. You brought up that young woman, or not that woman's family, and asked her that question. That's something, Steve, that we really like to focus on, especially with this show being the spouses of first responders, the daughter of a first responder. how big of a role does family, and family can be friends, right? Because I do believe that friends are family, but how big of a role do those close relationships play when it comes to recovery? How big of a role did your wife play when it comes to you getting through what you got through, or your children?
Well, it's funny. My daughter just quietly left as I'm doing this podcast, and she said she mouthed, "Bye, Dad, love you," as she walked out the door. Right, and so she's 25. She works in the medical profession. I'm not sitting here talking to you folks without my wife. First of all, second of all, sorry.
It's okay.
When I left that doctor's office, I had laid in my bed for over a month, feeling as low as a human being could feel, riddled with anxiety, had a bottle of Ativan beside my bed that every time I'd put it in my mouth, I'd spit it out because I'm your typical male and I didn't want to get addicted to it. But my daughter was in high school and she knew I was in a really bad way. But she would come rub my back and tell me how proud she was of me every day before she went to school and when she came home. I'm pretty confident that got me through those weeks until that wave of out of nowhere when I had a massive anxiety attack and couldn't sleep, that I decided to drive into Vancouver and across that bridge, and the strength, to be honest, to stop my car and the courage to get out of there. And that's what people don't understand. That's a courageous moment for a struggling human being that wants to fix everything for his family. Probably the bravest act he's ever going to do, she. Yeah, that's how it unfolded for me. I mean, if I look back at that journey, it's hard because those people that played a part in my life to get me here, to help me make a difference for others. Because make no mistake about it, badass or sexy Canadian accent. Oh, sorry. I still struggle, right? So every day is a struggle. I'm in a really tough department. I'm a ops chief. I got to make decisions. I'm in charge of wellness and discipline, tough portfolios. I do a lot of hikes with people that I talk to them, telling them what discipline's coming because of the dumbass move they made. But I understand why it happened, because they were struggling. Let's just go through the process and I'm here to support you. That's the chief I am. It's a hard role to juggle, right? But I think I figured that part out, and I'm way past my still date. I mean, I'm here only because I'm still enjoying what I do.
Thank you for sharing that. I mean, just sharing your story is, it just, it's going to help somebody, because there's so many that are feeling the same, have thought the thoughts and, have been there very close to. And, to know that you're not alone and you're not feeling these thoughts and emotions is huge.
Yeah, Jen, to answer your question, it's everything, but it almost makes it more emotional, Caroline, seeing your face, because people, you don't get all the answers, but people don't know what's going on in someone's head, but they're sick. Majority of people, depression takes their lives and their thinking is skewed. And I was sick when I wrote, when people read that chapter 11, I was very ill. And so people forget that part. And all this anger surrounds somebody taking their lives. And I understand that as well. But I also understand every layer of getting there when someone's there. I understand the family's piece. I understand it all because I've lost 5 people, including my brother, to suicide. My department had 3 suicides in 1 year to people that I knew personally, and nobody saw those coming. So, yeah.
We had the same recently too in our department from the county. We lost a police officer, and then my husband and another captain who was also very well respected and loved. So it's sad to see these people who we put in such a high pedestal. We think of them as the people that we go to for help. They're the ones who try to get us out of our holes, and they're suffering in silence. My son just walked by too, and he sees all this, and I just hope and pray that he knows that his dad was sick. and this wasn't something anybody would do in the right state of mind. And this is something that we obviously need to work on. And as a community, just come together and really support ourselves because, your life can change in a second. And, 1 minute I could be fine and the next minute I can't be fine. And I would hope and pray that, people come around and try to help if I ever needed that.
Yeah, thank you for saying that, Caroline. I'm sorry about all of those losses and especially yours, but life is hard. I tell people when they're at their lowest, life is hard. Let's look up. And then I always, I make I never tell people it's going to be okay because they have to do the work. I tell them it's okay. What's happening is this is okay. And then they have to put the pieces together of their own life. And usually it's very complicated. Like there's a lot of work to be done, but the best part about being as low as you can be, there's only one way and it's up. And, and a lot of people say, I don't want to get out of bed. And I know what that felt like. But you know what the best part is? If you don't want to get out of bed, then at least for that day, you got nothing to lose.
Yeah.
You got nothing to lose if you get out of bed that day.
So how do you talk to newer firefighters, recruits about this kind of stuff versus how you talk about the more veteran guys?
Yeah. Every recruit, I've been with 3 departments, Jen, and every new recruit has a book. And the book is The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk. I buy it with my own money. The department that I was fire chief of, I bought it for every fire department, every firefighter, not just recruits. Every new recruit gets that book from me with the message. You've read every firefighter training manual there is, and you'll continue to read them. This is the most important manual you'll ever have. Understand where your emotions come from. Understand what you can do about them, because if you don't, they will kill you one way or another. And it'll be through cancer, ALS, or through mental illness. And
you buy this with your own money.
I do. Yeah. It's the best book out there for people to, and the audiobook is, amazing because you can refer back to the audiobook. Every recruit should get that book in training.
I've heard of that book. I need to actually read it.
Yeah, do the audiobook. Now that I've done my Extinguished in an audiobook, I always tell people to do the audiobook because, you get to hear, it's different when you hear the person's voice who wrote it. And Bessel van der Kolk, he's the Harvard professor who developed EMDR, right? So there's lots of techniques out there, but, I call it the shame hole, and mostly for men. And your way out of the shame hole is very different than someone else's. Like your recovery is very different. Like your struggles are different. You could have the exact same event, respond to the same event, have the same family tragedy, but your emotions, your factory settings are different. So medication, SSRIs work for some people, counseling work for some people. Now we're doing all sorts of, psychedelics and ketamine for first responders. Different things work for different people. And that's what I tell people. You don't like counseling, find someone else. Different things work it's a journey, and it's hard work to get healthy. Yeah. It's hard work. And you know what, you guys, it's hard work to stay healthy.
I was just going to say, and to continue being healthy and to feel your best is hard.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is therapeutic for me.
It is. It really is.
It's kind of like journaling.
Yeah.
Right.
Except when I entered high school, I couldn't read, but I could barely write. And I have published 2 books, but my audiobook took me 4 months. I sat in my closet and I read my book at 4 a.m. to 6 a.m. because the producer's in New York. And honestly, it was one of the toughest things I've ever did. But people say they like hearing my voice, read my own story. And it was it's hard. Like anyways. Yeah.
That sexy Canadian voice.
Yeah. There you go.
What gives you hope right now for the future of mental health in the fire service?
Yeah, you know what, Caroline, hope is the answer to everything. I have a lot of hope. I have hope for the political landscape. I have hope for the fire service. I have hope for me and my family. If you have hope, you can get to tomorrow, right? And the fire service, you got you lovely ladies out there trying to make a difference by, keeping the conversation alive. You have people You have politicians standing up and saying, hey, we need to do a better job of, supporting our first responders. It's not just about wages and equipment, right? Like first responders, especially police and fire, they're known as super expensive and complainers. Hey, they're not wrong, but they still got a really tough job to do, right? And there are people in those organizations making amazing differences, and they're not raising a flag going, look at me. They're doing it because they got into a job where you can help someone when they're having their worst day. And there is very few professions on this planet where you can go to work and get that feeling. And yes, it's hard, but also you did sign up for it, but we're here to support you. And that narrative is just starting. And I'm going to say probably 5 years ago, we are really looking inwards of trying to help supporting our first responders in a different way, in a more inclusive way too, like men and women the same, but also differently, because it is different. Women aren't just being emotional because they're crying from a bad call. Men are now being emotional more than women because they're crying more often. Like I had 2 female firefighters who are badass captains, retired as the most respected captains in my department of 400. They had a tough run because they were first 2 females hired in the province of British Columbia. But they turned out to be the best leaders because they showed us men how to do it. And they knocked the top of the testosterone off of our fire department, and we became better overall. And it made us, interestingly enough, better at calls with that perspective, if that makes sense.
That we are better multitaskers. I'm just
yes. And we're fixers, right? You guys.
It's a good balance. It's a good
sure it is.
Balance. Steve, we're out of time, but I want you to share the names of your books again and let everybody know where they can find you, because I love everything that you're sharing, and I think you can help so many people.
Well, The Unbroken is a book about, your trauma from the past and how you dealt with it. And if you don't deal with it, it'll bite you in the ass. Extinguished is really talking about living with depression, mostly as a leader. It was written to honor my friend Ken. And I just wrote a 3rd book. Because I struggled to read, I go into elementary schools and I read for Literacy Week. And these kids in kindergarten kept asking me, do you have a fire dog? And I'm like, no, I have a dog. His name's Goose. He's at my feet here. But by the end of the last class, I'm like, I do have a fire dog. His name is Goose the fire dog. Well, I just wrote a children's book called Goose the Fire Dog. So that's my 3rd book. You can get them at any bookstore. You can Audible, all the Audible, Spotify, all those ones. You can listen to the audiobook. And thanks for having me on your show, you guys. I love what you're doing. And I'm really, really grateful to have had this time with you both.
Thank you, Steve. We really appreciate your time. Thank you for sharing your story, and, keep up the amazing work you're doing.
Yeah, thank you, guys. All the best.
You were worried about your dog, Steve. Meantime, mine are going crazy. So that is perfect timing to wrap things up. Steve, you're amazing. We always like to remind everybody here on First Alarm Family First, if you see something, to sound the alarm.
Save a life.
Till next time, guys.
Take care.